everybody, to Sippin' and Shippin'. I'm your host, Brian Weinstein. We'll be kicking it here every other Friday, quenching your thirst for an insider's take to enhance your customer experience. So grab your drink of choice, kick back, it's Sippin' and Shippin' time. Welcome, everybody, to another episode of Sippin' and Shippin'. I am your host, Brian Weinstein. I am with, as I always am, as I always will be, as long as she'll tolerate me, Caitlin Postal.
That was intense, Brian. I'm here today. I'll be here tomorrow, at least as far as I can tell. Sipping and shipping. Let's get it.
After that, no more guarantees?
No.
She's an episode by episode contract.
That's it.
Awesome. All right. And we have our very special guest, Nima from Shippo. Nima, welcome.
Hi, folks. Thanks for having me.
Now, appreciate you coming on and, dropping us some knowledge on parcel and the world of parcel. And there's a lot of intricacies there. And, why don't you give the audience a little bit of background on yourself and, where you came from and what you have going on right now at Shippo.
Well, again, thank you so much for having me. I'm an operator, a founder, and an investor. I've spent, more than a decade or decade plus now, I guess, in the venture ecosystem. I spent time at Groupon pre and post IPO, and I've done 2 tours of duty at Shippo. One very early on when we had actually first started, and one again since for the last 3 years. In between, I did a tour of duty in venture directly, working with Ben Narrison, who's now general partner of Tenacity Ventures, and Bryce Roberts at OATV doing indie VC at the time. And then I actually, started my own D2C brand, tried to do self-fulfillment, learned how hard that is firsthand, still have the brand on the side, albeit running poorly because I'm spending most of my time on partnerships at Shippo.
Yeah, there's nothing easy about being a startup.
No.
And there are some that can make it look easy. I think there are some that just sort of get lucky.
Even as someone who'd been, I've spent most of, especially the last 10 plus years, specifically in e-commerce and shipping, logistics infrastructure. Even with that background, having started a D2C brand, no one starts a brand saying, I want to get in fulfillment, right? You just want to do the thing that you were passionate about. You want to make the thing that you were passionate about. But then you find out that fulfillment ends up taking, some days more than half of your time. And thank God there are solutions for that now.
Yes. I wonder who those solutions could be.
No shameless plugs. Plugs.
Sorry.
But Nima, that D2C brand, the passion there was soccer, right? If I remember correctly, which as a soccer player myself, can you tell us? So we do work with a lot of startups and would like to think that startups listen to Sippin' and Shippin'. Can you tell us a little bit about how that startup expertise or just dipping your toe in that has helped or gave you some perspective on the shipping world?
Honestly, it's made me so much more sympathetic. There's something about having other entrepreneur friends who are building physical products and selling it, and they're telling you about the pain. But there's nothing like the physical back pain of self-fulfilling, like 100 things in one day.
Yeah, or going back to the pitch after 10 years and trying to have a kick around.
100%. I mean, honestly, visualizing 300 boxes in a second bedroom and 300 pieces of product, and then all the kidding stuff that you guys do. So like you want to have thank you cards in your box. You want to put a pin in your box. I recently sat next to an entrepreneur on a plane. Randomly, we started talking about fulfillment. She has a brand, and she was from her perspective, she's sort of saying how some of the problems she's having with her 3PL. And I'm telling her the sort of unit economics of how hard it is to actually run a fulfillment business. And by the end of it, she had so much sympathy. Right. She really did, right?
Yep.
Because from one perspective, you're like, God, I'm working so hard. I just want to sell my stuff. Why can't you just ship it on time? I'm like, look, there's all this stuff that goes into it. To you, it's just a cost. But imagine if you had to house all those boxes. Imagine if you had to get warehouse space. Imagine if you had to hire an employee. Imagine if you had to write those handwritten notes.
Doing it yourself was probably the only time in the brand's existence where you were pissed when you came in and there were more orders. You're like, I'm crying, I can't stand this, stop ordering.
I swear to God, that's exactly what happened. I mean, I ended up asking not just my wife, but like 3 friends to come through to be like, guys, I can't, like physically, I can't.
It's something we hear often, especially in that space, about just reaching that tipping point and how the logistics infrastructure really plays into the scalability of an e-commerce brand. Let me ask you, who are you using as your label buy provider back then?
Shippo.
You were.
I mean, I do this own. Like, Simon and Laura are my friends. I can't. I can't.
Right.
Yeah.
However, knowing what I know now, if not that business is sort of a hobby on the side now, but if I was really spending more time in trying to scale that business, there's 0 reasons why I wouldn't be working with someone like a Whiplash to actually help me fulfill. Because this actually sort of segues into a broader conversation that I really don't think we talk enough about in our industry. And I say industry broadly, like whether it's shipping or fulfillment or e-commerce generally, which is SKU level margins. It's not a sexy topic, but like the only way somebody can have a sustainable growing business in e-commerce, you have to have the SKU level margins to be able to even stomach a shipping cost, let alone a packaging cost, let alone outsourcing your fulfillment to a third-party logistics so that you can focus more on selling and scaling your business. But if you're screen printing some art piece on the same exact, black and white hoodie that everybody buys off of Alibaba for, $16, unless you're selling it for $100, you're not going to have the margins to be able to outsource fulfillment and really scale your operations. Or, you need to have a different strategy of saying, okay, I'm going to have 5 SKUs. Like this SKU, I have the margins and I can wholesale. Therefore, that I can outsource fulfillment to, and I'm going to do a lot of volume on that one. And then these 2, I'm willing to take a less than 50% gross margin on, and I'll do less volume, and maybe I'll self-fulfill because I'll only sell 30 of them a month.
Right.
We're in the business of volume.
Yeah, well, exactly. But, it's an interesting challenge and dilemma that I think a lot of these brands find themselves in. And if they're not paying attention, and to your point, because they're maybe too busy focused on areas that are not core competency like fulfillment or other areas, these things get missed. And then next thing you know, you're going back and you're looking at your P&L and saying, oh my God, what am I doing? And I'm doing all this, I'm spinning my wheels and I'm not making any money or at least making any traction moving forward.
Exactly.
And it's wild when people don't know those things, right? They don't know what's driving that, or they're just arbitrarily throwing out price points where they're going to offer free shipping, not really knowing where are those SKUs that are driving that, or what is your hero SKU. And I think that sometimes people get a little taken aback when you start digging and asking the questions and they don't know the answer.
Yeah.
So that's always very surprising to me.
At least from a warehouse perspective, especially a sophisticated operation like Whiplash, y'all deal with much larger brands. And I would say those folks, they have a certain level of sophistication that maybe the long tail of sellers don't have. Sort of Shippo's business, we have a platform side of the partnered side to our business, and then we have the direct business. On the direct side, we really have all these aspirational entrepreneurs and sellers. And so often when someone starts a business, it's because, Caitlin and Nima are like, our passion is soccer. And we want to be able to tell a story. So we get started on something and you take 10 steps. And by the time you get there, all of a sudden you're like, oh, shoot, what about packaging? Because you didn't get in business to think about packaging, or you didn't get in business to think about fulfillment. We got in business because we wanted to tell the story of soccer and we wanted to make these beautiful clothes. And so I think by the time folks get there, it's sort of a harsh reality. And, sometimes it's just hard to take a step back. And so I'm very sympathetic to it.
Yeah, for sure. I mean, we get calls today from people who are saying, hey, we need rates. And by the way, our first containers hit next Wednesday. And you're like, how did, and you realize that with everything going on for them to get to that point of launch, they are forgetting little minutia details that aren't so little or minutia, right?
100%.
So yeah, it's interesting. It's something that is why I think more so today than ever before, there is outsourcing. And people are just saying, I'm going to give this all up as soon as I can because I just can't do it. It's taking away from my core competency.
We're seeing it more and more too. I mean, just straight up data points of how many businesses come through Shippo. Our core product is, we're an API as a technology, but the front facing side of what people see is this web app. And they're asking us for fulfillment partners. Because that side of our business, we don't do the fulfillment. It's folks like y'all. So, I think it's just hard. It's hard because there's no education. There's no standard education in terms of, you want to make a wool jacket. Genuinely, you have to think about the sheep in New Zealand, the farmer, and then that wool is going to go to a factory in Thailand to get spun up into fabric, and then that fabric is going to get put on a ship and it's going to go to the port of LA, and then from port of LA it's going to get on a truck and go to a warehouse. But they don't tell you that when you're starting a business. They're like, hey, set up a Shopify store. Godspeed. Go start your business.
Exactly right.
But look, the best entrepreneurs break through that, and those are the wonderful stories, right? Like Hedley and Bennett is a customer of yours. Like, God, her story is incredible.
Yes, and they had to persevere through the pandemic when the restaurants were all closed, and they've done a great job navigating those waters. And I think a part of being an entrepreneur is being able to learn on the fly and pivot when you need to. And if you're caught somewhere and you're stuck, not being afraid to raise your hand and say, I need some help.
And thankfully, there's more help than ever before. I think one thing that sort of keeps me up at night, especially when we talk about logistics infrastructure in the US, is actually warehouse capacity.
Yeah.
When I talk to some of the executives on your team and some of my friends who are executives at other companies, constantly everyone is thinking about capacity shortage, right? Prologis, Amazon's biggest landlord, recently reported their earnings, and their CEOs come out and said, right now, and a little self-serving because that's their business, but as industry people, we know it's true. He's saying there's an 800 million square feet shortage of warehouse space in the US right now. Now, part of that maybe is more, grade A buildings. Sure, there's like, grade B and grade C, and you can find places with shorter ceilings and all that. But, and we know like the shortage in the next 4 years is almost 2x that. Like you can't build these facilities fast enough because to your point, people are coming. The demand is there. We actually just don't have it all set up.
Right. And interestingly enough, I was speaking to somebody about, so you have this shortage. Now we're doing so much in the e-commerce space, and so many of our brands have low SKU depth, a lot of SKUs, low SKU quantity depth. So we go very horizontal. So we could add levels. We could go mezzanine, pick tower. Well, the cost of steel is still so high. I was having a conversation with somebody who did an analysis. It's like $75 a foot to build a mezzanine. It's $90 a foot to build a building. Yeah, might as well just build another building. So, it's just they can't build them fast enough. And to your point, Nima, I mean, what we're finding throughout the country, like what we paid in California on a new lease 3.5 years ago, we're paying that now so far east in California. It's amazing. And it's just, that's not going to change. It may level. I don't think it's going to go back. Not until we get caught up.
I don't think so either.
Yeah.
I mean, at this point, it feels like Ohio and Utah are just warehouse space, right? Do people live in those states?
No, actually they do. You know what? We're 3 warehouses deep in Columbus right now.
I know.
And I'll tell you what, we are really, really enjoying the market out there.
Yes.
And it's really been a pleasure. Like the teams that we've built out there, our group, and Caitlin, you're supposed to yell at me because I'm shamelessly plugging again, but our group out there,
it's
our
relevant.
Leadership, yeah, it is. So our leadership team out there has done a great job of building a culture. Yeah. And there's a lot of people that are looking and eager for employment. So we've really enjoyed that market, and it makes sense for e-commerce brands to be middle of the country, either single node or dual node. Yeah.
Yeah. I mean, Ohio, Nevada, Atlanta, Chicago, Midwest, Utah.
Right.
Just naming all
Exactly.
the spots we're taking down buildings, Nima.
Yes.
The rent's
Funny how that
going up
works,
by the
right?
minute, Caitlin.
It sure.
Yes.
I know it. I know it. When I see those P&Ls come through, I see it. We just got to keep pitching it. But it's funny, right? Because people try and they want to outsource their fulfillment because they want to scale. So they try and be nimble, but it's not cheap, and it's not cheap because of these things that you're alluding to. So what do merchants do? I mean, we just have to sit them next to you on a plane and get that sympathy ear going so that they just love us. I think that's it.
I think so much of it is just honestly being able to understand each other's business. And I think so often especially in, it's a competitive landscape. When a brand goes out to try to find a 3PL, they're typically going into an RFP. They're typically not comparing apples to apples because different providers provide different things in different size warehouses. People have different scales. And honestly, that's the part where we're actively trying to, especially from a partner perspective, helping our partners and brands be better matches for each other. So like we know where this warehouse's strengths are, especially, again, with you guys, we know you have the ability to handle diversity in SKUs, high SKU count. Not every 3PL operation has that ability. So when we see someone like that, we see it truly as our duty to help them. If we can help an entrepreneur and her team sort of short circuit that painful process, then everybody's just going to be happier because we're sort of acting as a yenta and just making sure the best match is made.
Right.
100%. I'm just happy that it was a her, that the entrepreneur was a her. So I love that, Nima. Thank you for that.
Well, the person I sat next to was a her.
Right.
And so we're you also have the play now with carriers. And so just why don't you give the audience a little bit who may not be familiar with Shippo of who Shippo is and what they do.
So Shippo is an API company. We're an infrastructure. Very, very similar to folks like Stripe and Twilio. We're a vertical API. We do one thing and we try to do it as exceptionally well as we can.
Mm-hmm.
That one thing that we do is parcel shipping. So we have two sides to our business. There's a direct side to our business where we work directly with SMBs. And then there's the other side of our business, which is we serve as infrastructure for platforms and logistics infrastructure players. So this is anyone from Shopify shipping, where Shippo is the native Rails, the same way there's Shopify payments, and that's Stripe. Shopify shipping is now Shippo. To peer-to-peer marketplaces, so folks like Goat, the sneaker app marketplace, or Mercari, the secondhand marketplace, to folks like Whiplash and ShipHero, like a WMS and a warehouse. So in that way, we really try to serve as the shipping infrastructure for e-commerce broadly. Whenever we get into conversations about who Shippo's ICP is, my answer is always anyone who sells on the internet. It just depends how you're fulfilling. If you're Figs, you might not know who Shippo is, but the institution that you're using, Shippo's the infrastructure for them. Right. And if you're Nima's soccer brand, then you're using Shippo's web app and trying to not break your back.
Right, exactly. And who are the carriers that Shippo are connected to and that they're acting? I guess it's a middleware. Is that correct?
In some ways, yeah, we're a connector. So
yes,
for us, the carriers that we have ultimately is driven by our customers' usage.
Mm-hmm.
There's no point in us integrating a carrier that no one will use.
Right.
So historically, the way we've gone about it, look, if you're on the long tail, if you are Nima's soccer shop, in all likelihood, you're just using USPS or you're just basically using one carrier because you're not at a scale yet or sophistication to need more than one carrier. But as soon as you look at any sort of platform or 3PL, well, then that mix quickly changes.
Yep.
So we very much see ourselves as servants to our customers. So if our customer says, hey, I need carrier X, Y, and Z, then it's our job, our duty to go make that available to our partners.
Mm-hmm.
Again, like taking a very, very real example, working with your team, last year, there was a request for a middle mile orchestrator that we did not have, but it was a carrier that was vetted by your team. The demand was there. Your customers wanted that specific solution. So we went and integrated that carrier and made it available. And that's very important to us. And, actually your SVP of e-commerce and VP Parcel, who are good friends, we were talking about how this year we're actually adding 2 more middle mile orchestrators. And it was sort of a point of pride for me to be able to go to, my colleagues and be like, hey guys, we actually have even redundancy for you now. So if your customers start using this carrier and for whatever reason in peak, if that carrier hits capacity, here's 2 more that you can rely on. So you can still meet the SLAs that you've promised your customers and ultimately them to the consumers who are buying from them. So that's at the core of it. That's what we live and breathe for, to make sure that we can meet the standards that you all have for your customers.
And when you say middle carrier, that middle carrier is more of like a regional provider?
Yeah, I sort of call these folks the nouveau regionals. So right. Not so much your laser ships and on tracks in that traditional way.
Yep.
But they'll use same and next day delivery folks for the first mile. They'll do the middle mile orchestration. So sometimes that means buying excess capacity on a plane to take it on a plane from location A to B. Sometimes it means it goes into a sort center, then it gets injected DDU into postal. A lot of times that's what ends up happening. And, this is a very interesting conversation broadly, but a lot of these folks have come to play, especially given the last 2 years, and the power of the existing oligopoly of the carriers in the United States. So you have the Postal Service, UPS, and FedEx. They very much benefited from having infrastructure in place. So they've had tremendous pricing power in that time, right? UPS just recently reported their earnings that parcel volume was down 3%, but revenues were up, 9.5%. Well, how does that work? So if you have incredible pricing power, that,
right.
But that's given birth to many, many competitors who are coming in.
Yep.
So a lot of these middle mile orchestrators are directly going after, FedEx Ground and UPS Ground's business.
Yeah. Go ahead, Caitlin.
Now we're just getting more and more folks looking for those solutions. And it sounds like are you proactively going out and building those partnerships, or how are you maintaining those?
Absolutely. April of 2020, myself and a few folks within Shippo, it was sort of our aha moment that, oh my God, there's going to be capacity constraints. Like
right.
we knew, the three of us just started talking about how much capacity shortage there is, but everyone's in the industry's known this. Like this was just accelerated by COVID.
Yes.
That capacity constraint existed before COVID. So that was our cue to immediately go and try to add as much redundancy to the system as we could add, to ensure that folks can at least even stitch together pieces of the journey of a package, right? And if someone is sophisticated enough to have, say, at least 4 or 5 warehouses strategically placed around the country, then you really can stitch it together and say, okay, yeah, I'm going to use this. And again, I'm just making this up, but I'm going to use, Nima on his bike for the first mile to take it to, a sort center. Then, Postal is going to, put it on a plane and take it somewhere else. And then Axle Hire is going to do, the same day, next day delivery once it arrives in Boston or wherever it goes. So that's been what's been fascinating for us to watch. Now, look, the big 3 and really, big 4 at this point with Amazon, they still have tremendous power and they still dominate the market in terms of pure volume. But what used to be that 10%, that was that other is gaining ground, and it's gaining ground meaningfully.
Yeah. Well, I would imagine, what is it? The necessity is the mother of invention, or in this case, innovation, right? And so you had a point in time, I could almost picture the board of directors for UPS and FedEx in January of 2020, or even December of 2019, when they talked about building out infrastructure. They're like, we have time. And then next thing you know, a year became like a 5-year acceleration growth in 12 months. And now they don't have capacity. They're turning away business. They don't really want to be fair in the negotiations process. Now, again, being somewhat sympathetic to their position, they were fighting through, and they had their labor constraints and capacity constraints as well. But something's got to give, and that just accelerated the growth of these middle mile brands, as you call them. And can you give us some names, just some of the names that are out there that are the growing players?
Yeah, of course. I think Airterra's super interesting. I think in general, what American Eagle, like we could have a whole session on American Eagle. I think what they're doing is very interesting as a brand. I think X Delivery is another one. We're looking to get Airterra live. Pandian's another one, which is actually founded by a former Amazon and Walmart e-commerce executive. We're just seeing more and more of these. And look, from Shippo's perspective, as much as the SMB is our customer, as much as the 3PLs and warehouses are our customers, carriers are also our customers. We very much have this sort of demand and supply. In many ways, we're a marketplace. So the carriers are the supply side of our marketplace. So for us, diversity in shipping options, we view it as a good thing for the market. And hopefully the carriers can actually focus on and really zoom in on what is their strength. So if you have the infrastructure, if you have the planes, if you have the trucks, where are the areas that you actually excel, right? There are many, many, many growing regional carriers, whether it's UDS or Better Trucks or Grand Husky. I mean, these people are really investing in infrastructure because they're seeing the demand. And where they're seeing that is super fascinating because, there's a whole category of consumables. Uber Postmates is doing a lot of this, right? This is getting your medicine to you same day or getting an Apple Watch to you same day. There's like that category of folks that's very consumable based. And then, there's the traditional parcel, like, you order headphones. And do you want that in 0 to 3 days? Do you want it in 2 to 7 days? Do you want it in 7+ days? I think those carriers just enable you as a brand to provide that optionality.
Yes.
And optionality is the name of the game. I mean, sincerely, that's the name of the game.
Yep. No, I agree. And I think choices and seeing how that market shakes out over the next few years is going to be very interesting. Because I think there are some great players, and I agree with you. I think with American Eagle as an example, there was an interesting play, but it makes a lot of sense when you start to think about it and what they're trying to accomplish in a parcel market that did not have the infrastructure to continue to grow at the pace that it needed to.
Yes, very, very impressed, truthfully, by their leadership team and how they're thinking about it. Again, as a brand. Now you have to have, going back, we're talking about smaller businesses having the operational and financial wherewithal. I mean, these folks really have the operational chops and the financial wherewithal. So as a brand, in many ways, they've insourced logistics. I mean, they're the only brand I know that's actually increased forecast.
Right.
Right. And a lot of it has to do with them insourcing. But, not everybody can insource. Not everybody can go and buy a warehouse and buy a carrier. Amazon.
Exactly right. And I've had conversations with Shaker over at American Eagle, and he's got there's definitely a vision there that they are working on.
Yes.
Which is exciting.
Yes.
Amazing. Caitlin, anything else that we didn't cover?
No, I think we covered a lot.
This was fantastic. I mean, really enjoyed this conversation, and again for the space and the audience that we're targeting for this podcast. I think this is chock full of a lot of valuable information. First and foremost, don't bust your back. Right?
I know better now, and I have friends.
Exactly.
Take care of me.
And by the way, this is the first time I've ever been sorry that we're only doing an audio podcast, because your background, which is not a filter, by the way, is fantastic.
I can send you all a picture so we can without me in it, because this is way prettier than without.
Let's do it. Yeah.
Amazing. All right. Nima from Shippo, thank you. It was fantastic. Really appreciate you coming on. And hopefully we can find some other topics to have you on again down the road.
Would love that.
Amazing. All right, Caitlin, you want to carry us out?
Sure. Thank you, Nima. And thank you, everyone, for tuning in. Check us out at sippinandshippin.com or on your favorite podcast platform. Thank you, everybody.
Thanks.
Thank you.
Bye.